Hello. Can you hear me okay, Glashanda? Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and invite our guest now.
I don't know. Reminds me of Independent Alaska that we're doing the IE.
Hello.
All right. Well, transmitting a visceral reaction to Southern Roots pack. We can talk more about it. Okay. So the client team on Take Action in Minnesota is
trying to see. Looks like we have some
tag teaming Kayla and Maya, and then
1 second.
we have a unique.
Can you hear us, Sarah?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
About
but I hear somebody else.
Who wants?
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
It was amazing.
All right.
Sorry. I'm outside. Sorry, guys.
No worries, no worries. Okay, can just wanted to check now. Can you all hear me okay? Can we hear Dara okay?
Mic check, 1 2 1 3.
Okay, awesome. Well, first, y'all, wanted just to say thank you for everyone joining and who's going to check this out live, and we'll just check this out later on. And also thank you to you, Dara, for joining us for this very special conscious conversation brought to you by Can't Stop Won't Stop Consulting. Maybe before we dive in, is it okay if I read a little bit of your bio so folks know who our special guest is today, and then we can dive into questions? Okay, awesome. All right. Born in Torrejon, Spain, Dara Baldwin, her started her career while attending college and working in the healthcare administration realm in various operational and finance executive positions for almost 20 years. In 2004, she shifted gears to change her career directions towards advocacy in the social justice and equity realm of the work. This led her to her current position as the director of the national policy for the Center for Disability Rights Incorporated, using a peer model where people with disabilities show other people with disabilities how to live independently and advocate for themselves, and fusing advocacy and supportive services. CDR is a not-for-profit community-based advocacy and service organization for people with all types of disabilities. Working within the disability justice movement and with an intentional strategy to end racism and systems of oppression, Dara is responsible for the legislative work, from research to writing documents, testimonies, letters, and reports, to assisting with advocacy outreach and working with congressional staff, the administration, coalition partners, and others on multiple issue areas for improving the lives of persons with disabilities. So I could go on about all the work. I think I will leave it there, as I imagine more will be able to come out in our conversation through this interview. And I also know that you have some exciting news for us at some point today too. So looking forward to that as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. And thank you to our wonderful ASL interpreter and everyone out there. Happy TGIF. Happy Friday.
Yes. Happy Friday. Happy Women's Equality Day, which we'll definitely be talking about today. But I want to start off with the first question that we ask all of our guests. And in the spirit of Ella Baker, who are your people?
My people. So I will tell you, I am a Black liberationist who also believes in abolitionism. So my people are those people who believe in all of those things. So, if you're talking on the Ella Baker level, of course, Ella Baker, and people like, oh gosh, Beth Ritchie, Audre Lorde, Sonia Sanchez, mostly Black women. My own mother, God rest her soul, she was a true Black liberationist. And I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. So if people know about Newark, we very much are a Black liberation city. And I had many people to look up to there. And, not only in politics, but also in arts. Sarah Vaughan, right, is from Newark, New Jersey. We have a lot of history of religious and social justice movements that came out of Newark, not just Christian. People don't know, but Mosque Number 5 is in Newark, New Jersey, which was a very big mosque for the Muslim community, and did a lot with the Muslim community. And then we're also home of some of the number 1, 2, 3 scholars who left New Jersey studying from Rutgers and went over to California and started Kwanzaa, Kalanga. That's where he studied, and so a lot of Black liberation freedom is in New Jersey, specifically in Newark. And so those are my people. That's who I was able to grow up with. Ross Baraka, the mayor of Newark, his father was the famed poet Baraka. So, and he had the Hope House in New Jersey. Sorry, hold on. Oh my goodness, that's living in the city. Sorry, you guys. But Baraka was, he's from Newark, New Jersey, built his career in Newark, New Jersey as a poet and activist of Black liberation. And they had what's called the Hope House in Newark, New Jersey. And we all grew up running in and out of that house. And Sonia Sanchez was there and everything. So those are my people.
Appreciate that. And may folks continue to inspire, to guide, give hope, and shed light as we continue on, even in some of these tumultuous times that we're currently living in. The next question that I want to invite, or would love to hear your thoughts on, is when was the last time you felt brave?
Oh, I think I would have to say I feel brave every day, getting up and being a Black woman in the United States of America, but not being so dramatic in that way. I would have to say over the last couple of years of living through this pandemic, which is not over. We are still in a pandemic. It is unfortunate. We literally still have people who are dying of COVID, but no one wants to talk about it. We literally, in the disability community, have lost about 2 or 3 people in the last 2 to 3 weeks to COVID, right? To that. And so I think that's, every day living through COVID, I'm being brave and actually going out and doing that. And then I feel that I'm being brave when I decide to be a good person and decide to do things that other people don't want to do or think they, just shouldn't do. I think it's brave of me to do that. I don't like to be conceited, but I think it's brave. And Greg, you know me, and the audience will know me. I'm someone who I don't hold my tongue. I don't have time for it, as I tell people all the time. As long as BIPOC folks are being harmed and dying every day, yeah, I'll speak and say whatever I want. And so I feel like I'm brave when I do that.
Well, I can attest that there are many times I've seen you speak your truth to power, and want to just honor you and honor all that you have and continue to do, and to be brave each and every day in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a time where these systems that were, were designed in a ways to perpetuate inequities and racism and ableism, are being, like, people are now understanding the ways in which they are particularly impacting folks, especially folks who live at multiple intersections of different identities. So thank you for your continued bravery. And that's a real statement that like living each day and just existing and through a pandemic is brave. And so I wanted to just honor you and thank you for lifting that up. You know, I know that you've been in this work for some time. And, you know, even as we are living through some challenging times, I would love to hear about some of the work and particularly to end racism and end systems of oppression. Can you share an experience or two that has had a positive impact in your life and has informed the, like your way of being or how you do the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking the question. So with, people make those statements. I work towards ending racism and systems of oppression. And it's a big statement. So for me, the beginning is knowledge. Knowledge is power, and is educating people who feel like the systems are okay. And that really comes from knowing your history. I'm a history buff. I wanted to be a history major in college, and my parents were like, no, you need to make money when you graduate. So it's always been a hobby of mine on the side. And so I start there by like trying to educate folks about all kinds of history, right? I believe we're everyday learners, and I learn every day. So learning about, you asked for a good example. For me was, I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and about, say, 5 years ago, 2017, I was honored to meet a young lady who does work around the Dalit community, right, and caste system in South Asia. That I knew about it because Stokely Carmichael, if people don't know history, when he left the United States, he went to Vietnam. And he worked with the Dalit in Vietnam. So I had known about that, and I knew what the Dalit community was. I really didn't have a great understanding of the apartheid of it and how it has affected that community here in the United States, right? Like, I was like, oh, wait a minute. And so that was to me, it was interesting. Her name is More, for the interpreter is ThenMorhi. And she is amazing, and I'm just giving her sign language spelling, but she teaches classes, and I went to the class, and I was the only person not South Asian. And it was real interesting, right? The community was looking at me, and I said, well, technically, you all should be teaching this to the world, right? Like to other people. We should not talk to each other. And that was really a good lesson for me, too, that so many of our communities, even, like yourself, Greg, right? You're Latina, Asian, but we always stay in our little circles and talk to each other. And I think that that's been a great way of me, even though people don't see it as ending racism, I really think it is, because in order to, racism shows up in different ways for different people and in different communities. Systems of oppression show up for different ways. And so that's, for me, I feel in this work, every time I learn about, right, like I didn't know about the Filipino community till I started working with 1 Billion Rising, and now she goes by V, but she used to be Eve Ensler. I didn't know about that work over there. I didn't know, what was happening to, women and different communities in the Philippines. And so every time you learn and you add to it, it not only makes you more intelligent and have more knowledge. I feel for me, it gives me more power to know that there's other people who are doing this work too. And that change looks different for all those communities, right? So that we do this work every day, and people are like, how can you keep going? And I'm just so tired, and I feel like things don't change. And I say to myself, well, it may not change for me in my community right here, but when I hear about change in the Philippines, and I hear about change in the Congo, and I hear about change, in New York City, where I live in DC, it's just beautiful to me. And that's what makes me keep going. And then the other side of it, because people don't want to talk about that side, is the traumatic side of it.
Yeah.
This work is traumatizing, and I don't care what anybody says. And I love, the work you do, where we have to balance it out. You open this session with dancing and beautiful music and your beautiful smile on that screen, and we have to do that in this work. We have to embrace the beauty of ourselves as our people and whatever it is we are, right? Whatever race, religion, sexual orientation, right? And we have to find joy in something else, because this work will overtake your life, and it is traumatizing. And I try to tell a lot of young activists to please balance it. People talk about balanced life. Please do it, right? Like, literally, don't talk to anyone for one weekend out of the month, other than your family, than your friends. Just turn that phone off around, alerts or stuff. Whatever's going on, it's going to go on. They don't have to have you. At night, stop. At a certain time of night, stop working and just enjoy your life, because you only get to live once, right? And so that's the other side of it that really helps me to understand that talking to racist white folks on a regular basis is traumatizing. And that's the only way we can end these systems, is I have to confront the problem. I have to have those conversations. That is a necessity of the job, but it's also a traumatizing part of the job. And I have to say that I've been blessed to meet people like yourself and other people who have taught me to cut that off, Dara, and let's have some fun and let's enjoy each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things that you said that I want to lift up. I think the first part of what you were saying reminded me of the importance of just solidarity, and particularly cross-racial solidarity. And, it took me some time to really understand that even the term person of color is not like as widely used, but people understood like your proximity to whiteness versus your proximity to blackness means you get treated differently and you have access to different services or rights or resources, period, no matter kind of where you're at. And I think for me, anyway, solidarity is an important part of not only our survival, but one of the ways that I feel like we'll be able to really thrive as a collective. The other thing that I heard you say was really about like how could we create, and this is a lot of the work that I feel like we do with Can't Stop Won't Stop Consulting, is like, how do we create the conditions for folks to be their full selves? And that for us includes feeling rest, feeling joy, feeling loved, and like a sense of belonging. And I think there are ways to do that, of course, at an organizational, systemic level, which we should continue to push and advocate for. But sometimes I think people forget that there's that ability and opportunity within oneself, and to do that and help create that for loved ones or folks in your circles of trust and community. And so I appreciate you reminding us of the importance of that, and how like this is about the long haul, right? This is a marathon. It's even though sometimes I feel like the work makes us feel like it's a sprint all the time, this is a marathon that's really long term. And to your point, like, there were many people, even how we started this conversation in terms of who your people are and who's paved ways and continues to guide and watch over us. Like it's we pay it forward and we live that circle of life, but it's an important part of how we're in the present, but be able to contribute to the future, even if we don't necessarily will see or benefit from some of the things that we're fighting for. That can't be what guides our decision.
Yes, yes, yes. We are doing this work for the future.
Absolutely. Um, and so I know today is Women's Equality Day, and of course, as some folks may know, this was initially established to celebrate the passage of the 19th Amendment that allowed women the right to vote. And today,
Wait. Let's go back, because
okay.
people do this all the time, Greg. That gave white women. Don't forget that adjective. That's why I roll my eyes. This is not a day I celebrate. Let me be very clear, and they know this.
Okay.
White women got the right to vote in the 19th Amendment. My grandmother and black folks, indigenous folks, and even disabled folks, disabled women did not get the right to vote till July 26, 1990. So let us all be clear. That adjective needs to be put there. White women got the right to vote. But go ahead.
No, thank you for clarifying that. And so I guess the question is, I guess part of the question was going to be about, yes, it's Women's Equality Day, but I think that many people would argue that there's still a lot more things that need to be done to be able to truly celebrate. And so could you share a little bit more about, maybe share more about, like, on a day like this where you understand some of the discrepancies, what is important for people to know, or how do you approach how this could be a learning moment for many people who may not necessarily have the full context or history of how it went down?
Yeah, no, and that's what I totally agree with. And look, I'm a member of League of Women Voters. Which is a mostly white, predominantly white woman organization. And I constantly push this. I'm not saying they shouldn't celebrate. It is so interesting to me that the pushback on CRT, on critical race theory, right, is generated towards only conservative white folks. When, let's be real and let's be honest, the limousine liberals who want to sit here and talk about how people are against CRT and don't want to talk about real racial history. Mm-hmm. We have it in our own right here. You have a Women's Equality Day that they will not put that adjective, and that when I say it to specifically people who sub Legal Women Voters, AAUW, people who this is their day, why do we have to bring that up, Dara? Why do we have to bring up race in this conversation? You're just right, that pushback from you liberal white women, that you don't want to put that adjective of white women got the right to vote and celebrate your whiteness and your white privilege you received that day, is just as harmful as these right-wing conservatives who don't want to talk about CRT and don't want to talk about our history as it really was. And so for me, that's what I've always done on this day. Whenever they've asked me to speak, I make sure that adjective is there, and I make sure people understand and know that not only is that adjective there, but the story behind why that happened and why so many Black women and indigenous women specifically got angry at the white woman's movement is because when given the choice, when it came to compromise, which happens in this work, white women said, yes, give us the right to vote and forget the Black and indigenous women who were right there, doing the work with them. Some of you may know I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We were founded on January 13th, 1913. Why? Because number one, 22 women wanted to be social justice. They wanted to do social justice work. They were originally members of AKA, the other sorority, which our vice president is a member of. But they felt like those women were not doing enough around social justice, so they created Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. I tell you this because they wanted to be incorporated and founded that day because that was the Women's Equality March day. Mm-hmm. Now, when they had the Women's Equality March, which is here in Washington, D.C., and they had organizations, they lined them up in alphabetical order. The letter alphabet D comes about in the middle of the alphabet. But where did they put us? Where did they put our 22 founding fathers? At the end of the line, right? Just like the back of the bus. They also demanded and made it a requirement for those 22 women to be in the march. They had to have a chaperone, a male chaperone. So when you see you'll see a picture, if you've ever seen it, the historic picture of our founding members, and there's a man standing there, and people will say, who is that man? And we're like, that's the chaperone that they made. So these white women not only put us at the end of the line, but then made us have a chaperone, right? So understand, that's why I told you I love history, and understanding, knowing your history and what's going on here makes you view so-called historic celebratory days like this here in a different light, in a different way. in a
Absolutely.
different manner. And so for me, that's what it's been. And I always push back on the fact that, yes, this is Equality Day for white women. And just so you know, in my work, I'm not working for equality. I'm working for equity. And those are two different things. And we can talk about that later, but they are
Yeah.
two different things. And that's what people don't understand either. So that's how
Well,
I feel about equality.
no, I appreciate that, and for us, anyways, we recognize that because it is used, and some are like folks use it as an opportunity. Like I think it's important to bring out nuance and to bring out additional information and to invite more conscious conversations like this, so that people could. So I don't think that there's enough alternate kind of ways in which people understand, and so I appreciate you naming what you named, continuing to push back, and also like continuing to leverage this opportunity so that more people can be educated and have a better understanding. Because I know that even for myself, like I feel like I continue to learn, especially as folks bring some of those questions and nuance to the conversation, and so only can imagine that more and others can and will do the same by conversations like this, more opportunities to kind of question, like, well, why is it quote unquote celebrated, or what is the rest of the story that people can be better informed about. So I appreciate the layers there. I think I'm actually very curious and would invite, like, you kind of mentioned the difference between equality and equity, and would love for you to share a little bit more about that, and how you understand the differences and why it's important to make that delineation.
Yeah, sure. So equality is the word. Like, and people say they are two different words, right? So equal, to be equal to someone or to have the same thing, that is not equity. Equity is fair and impartial, right? So let's talk about, here we go, the systems we are trying to create. This is another thing when people are like, oh, we want to reimagine these systems and reframe them. And I say, I don't want to reimagine them, and I don't want to reframe them, because this, if you have the same system, still has the same leader. So one example or analogy I give is, you have a chessboard. People just want to move those pieces around, but still keep the same chessboard. I want to wipe the pieces off and turn the chessboard over and start all over again. Right? Another analogy I've been using, which I think has worked better for people, is if you're a couple and you get together, right? I don't care, man, woman, woman, man, whatever it is, but you get together and you are the person who moves into that person's home. And you 4 or 5 years down the line, you say, you know what, this isn't my home. It's still your home. And the person says, well, let's just repaint it. Let's just, we'll redesign the house. No matter what, no how many times you redesign that house, that's still your partner's house. You need to move out and get a new foundation, right? And something that you both purchased together. So when you say to me, you want to reimagine, like people, I want to reimagine law enforcement. No, I don't, because it still puts white people in charge. Same thing with equity. So that's what equity means. You create a system. You want the system to work for that community. Equality just says is like universal design, that everybody can use the curb cut, or everybody can use whatever system you created. And that's not what I want. I want to be able to use the system as a Black woman, and it be for me. I want you to be able to use the system as a queer man, right? I want so-and-so to be able to use it as a disabled person. That is the difference, because we're not equal. Our issues and our traumas are never going to be the same, but you can create systems that do make sure that it celebrates who I am as a Black woman, and it addresses the issues that I'm concerned about as a Black woman. That's the difference, right? Like people really, and I'm not saying you're wrong, you're right. It's just the work that I do is towards equity. It's not towards equality. For me, I don't think equality has been working, right? And so that's why I say, right, changing these systems. And if you're an abolitionist, then you understand and know that too, because in abolitionism, it's not equality, it's equity, it's liberation of a people.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I definitely think, especially, I asked that because I think it is a conversation that I hear people raise, and sometimes people do use the words interchangeably, and clearly there is some delineation. And so I appreciate your offering of what that means for you. Um, I'd love to even shift a little bit. You talk a lot about disability justice. I also know that you've talked a lot about gender and gender justice. Can you, from your vantage point, and in the spirit of intersectionality, can you talk a little bit about how do you help folks understand how our liberation is connected, how these systems of oppression are connected, and ways in which people can understand that, like, disability justice is gender justice, is racial justice. Can you share more there on what you would offer to folks who are maybe newer to the space or newer to understanding some of these ideas of justice?
Yeah, sure. Well, again, it comes to history. A lot of people also don't think there's a difference between disability rights and disability justice, and there really is. Again, right? Different language is used, so of course they're different. And so people who disability justice has 10 principles. The first being intersectionality, the 10th being collective liberation, right? And it needs to be understood that the disability rights community will never celebrate nor follow any of those principles, not number 1 through number 10. Purposefully, they have made this clear. And that is why BIPOC folks got together and created disability justice. And that comes from white, upper middle class, wealthy community who refuse to allow those BIPOC disabled people to embrace their multi-marginalization. And I say this to you from experience because I watched it. For you, those of you who don't know, I've been here in DC doing disability work since 2009. And these young people were coming here as fellows and as interns, and they were told that your race, your sexual orientation, your gender, your religion is not important in the fight of the work to end systems of oppression. Your disability is more important. And what these BIPOC young people said was, no way, like, you can't tell a Black woman not that her Blackness and being a woman and being queer, because many of them were queer, doesn't, is it part of the marginalization in their life? And so that's really what disability justice is saying, right? Multi-marginalized. And what I would push back, and I kind of multi is something I help push forward, and it's not multiply, because we're not trying to, it's multi for multiple, multi-dash marginalizations, is because there is an African-American transgender woman, formerly incarcerated refugee who has a disability out there. And if that person comes, because we're working for organizations that mostly do service, like I work for CILS, CIL, Centers for Independent Living. We do social services. That is, right? We help people. And the trans woman I just described is coming to us. And we have to be ready to protect this person and give this person what they need. And you cannot deny them their other marginalization. And so that's where disability justice came from. And then, of course, with, gender justice, it's a shame. And I know I'm being recorded, and I know I'm live on IG. And what I say to you, like I told you earlier, I said to these folks, it's a shame that the disability rights community, still in 2022, because I literally just had to have this conversation with some of them, are just as white as they could possibly be, don't care, just as homophobic, xenophobic, racist as they could possibly be, and they don't see themselves that way. They don't, right? They're like, well, we just don't know how to help those people, right? It's like, okay, but you're a civil rights organization, okay. And so we had to come together, like we talked about earlier, in solidarity, and say and understand and know the community out there who are people with disabilities are everyone. And as we said, right, that's what intersectionality is. And that when we create change, you can't create change for just the black side of you, or right, or and that's the other thing, religion, most of those groups are either Jewish or Christian, we'll be clear, right? Or the Muslim side of you, or the Buddhist side of you, right? They don't even believe it. They're like, where are these people coming from? Or the people who don't believe in anything, right? Who have no spirituality, which is fine. That's their, atheist, that's fine. But you can't do this work and quote unquote leave someone behind. We have to make sure that we are constantly creating change that is a change that is what collective liberation is. That is what intersectionality is, right? And then in between, you should read those principles in between. Of course, is putting at the forefront BIPOC disabled people. You cannot, this whole concept of empowering people. You can't give people power. Everybody has power. What we can do is create situations where their power can be strengthened, where their power can be helpful, and where their power can move and create change. And I think that's really what the disability justice, those young Mia Mingus and, Leroy Moore and all of that crew, who started this, by Lisa Thompson with her hashtag disability 2Y. Those are some powerful, young, BIPOC, disabled people who have changed the world. Absolutely. And that's what disability justice is to me. Absolutely. And knowing them.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for lifting up the 10 principles of disability justice. If you are interested in checking it out, you can actually go to Sins Invalid, SINSINVALID.org. And they actually have a pretty accessible explainer. And I also appreciate you lifting up Mia and Leroy. Actually, Leroy spoke at one of the initial People's Collective for Justice and Liberation town halls. And shout out to the co-founder. I'm a co-founder along with DJ Cutting Candy, who also somebody that I learned a lot about just disability justice from. But those principles have been such a foundation and a way to be able to help explain, like, this is about, like, one I talk about a lot is interdependence. Is like, we have to be here, for each other and together. And that the individualism, which I feel like, especially over the last week around some of the student debt cancellation discussions, it's very clear that people are like, well, what about me? What about me? And I'm like, what if we talk more about we? What if we talk more about other people and how just different the world would be with that kind of shift? And I think the 10 principles of disability justice have that at the forefront. And so I would encourage folks to check that out, and shout out to the folks who have had the foresight, have the brilliance, the minds, the willingness to engage and support others in learning and understanding, and for continuing to push, because we need it. And I know that I draw a lot of inspiration and reminders from the work that you mentioned, especially from folks within disability justice movement. With that being said, the next question I want to ask you is, especially from your vantage point and doing this work for some time, if folks are tuning in and they're like learning, they're like, okay, I'm fired up. I want to take some action. What are some ways folks can be supportive, and what are some things that people could be supportive of to help us reach this collective liberation?
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, follow the people I just mentioned: Leroy Moore, Leroy Moore, Moore, Keith Jones, KeithJones, like it sounds. Carrie Gray, Kerigry. And Carrie Gray has started her own organization around multicultural disabled people. N as in Nancy, AMD is where you'll find her organization. Following those people: Justice Shorter, the word justice, and then Shorter, SHORTER. They are doing work, pushing things forward, having conversations. And you have, there's a number of litigators who are out there who I can get you that information. We also are really starting a disability justice scholar, like scholars around, right? There are a number of universities who are starting disability programs. And so if you're interested, if you're in college or university, please join. You can join those classes from what I understand as an elective at most schools. I don't think we're at the point yet where it's a major because just so you know, in academics, it takes a little while for that to happen, but you can do it as an elective and at a graduate level as well as undergraduate. So that's the way to do that. There's many different organizations you can support. And if you go to Carrie's website and her information, she has a lot of lists of BIPOC organizations. And I'll say this, you know, there are a number of BIPOC disability justice organizations around the country who are doing great work. What there is not happening is that on a national level and having a national organization, which is a conversation that's just starting with some of the BIPOC disabled community. And I say that because when I was saying the disability rights community before, they have a coalition. We in DC, we work in coalition, leadership conference on civil and human rights, 200 and something organizations. The Coalition for Disabled People, they have over 122 organizations. They're all white, right? They're all led by white folks. The boards are white. The ED presidents are white, mostly male, which is interesting, right? Very few LGBTQ folks over there, very few BIPOC. I was the only person of color, not Black, of color, who did policy for many years. Still, there's no people of color there. I don't work with them anymore. But we need to have a national voice around disability justice. And so people are working on that and would love to have more conversations about that. And for me, I want to start a Black think tank. We need a Black think tank in DC, and people don't know. I'm thinking along the lines of AEI and CATO. We need to counter to AEI and CATO. And so I've been pushing that forward and working towards having something like that. And if you don't understand and know what AEI, CATO, the Heritage Foundation, I'm sure you've heard of these organizations, but they are very well funded, but they are also very well strategic about what they're doing. And I find that again, white liberal people who are working supposedly with us, they have no strategy. And the strategies are, the fact that they have no strategy is killing us. And we as Black folks and we as people of color or BIPOC folks need to start doing things different. And I really think that having a true think tank here in Washington, D.C. that concentrates on Black issues and has a strategy around media, around quote unquote the bench, right, the judiciary, around making sure we have a whole, we need to have binders of judges, binders of people who are going to run for office and who think like us and want to do things like us. We need to make sure, you know, it's not just writing the policy and the regulations and all of that. It's a whole concept around how this work is done. And so that's something else that I think where people can start to help out. If you know people with money who are looking to get involved in policy, let us know because, you know, although many of our community is suffering, lots of our community has a lot of money. And that money is being funneled to different kinds of organizations that are really not helping us to move and make change. So that's where I would say, right, we need to have some serious conversations about what it looks like to end systems of oppression and racism done by Black folks, BIPOC folks, for BIPOC folks.
Absolutely. And if you aren't already, this is also a chance for you to follow Dara at NJDC07. You won't regret it. And if I would also try to find a way to get on an email listserv with with her as well, because you'll definitely see a lot of truth to power. Always and anytime I hear from Dara. So wow, thank you so much for taking some time. Thank you so much for dropping so many gems of wisdom. Is there, I guess my last question to you is there anything that you want to share to young organizers, folks new to the movement, about any words of encouragement or anything along those lines that you'd like to offer?
So yes, I'll give the words of encouragement, and then I'll do my announcement for you, so you know.
Oh yeah.
So no problem. Words of encouragement are, and I think you said it earlier, that if you're going to do this work, know that it is a marathon, that it'll take time for whatever change you want to happen, and also know that in that marathon, you might run over some barriers. Something might happen. You might engage in setbacks and engage in things that don't go the way you want. I don't like to say failure, but things that don't go the way you want it to go. And go back to what we were talking about too. That's your time to reinvigorate, go do whatever it is you do, sit on a beach or whatever, relax with nature, play with your family, your children, your friends, whatever it is, and then come back and recharge. Always recharge and come back. It really does help you have a different outlook. I am a spiritual person, and I do think that meditation and centering yourself every morning and every night, and sometimes in the middle of the day, are really good things to do. Learning about breathing, just because you're spiritual, or doing meditation doesn't mean you have to be religious. And there is a difference. But I tell people that a lot of learning how to breathe and listen to yourself really helps you out, keeps you mentally and physically healthy. And so that's my advice to people. And get yourself a good mentor. Try to get a good mentor, or many of them, not just one. And so my announcement, so I wanted to tell you all, and it's nice to tell you here, is that I'm towards the end of my career and ready to go towards retirement. And one of the things I want to do is be a scholar. And so I have taken a position at the McCourt School of Public Policy, which is at Georgetown University. And I will be teaching disability justice, equity, and policy. This will be my first semester starting next Tuesday, fall 2022. This is I'm an adjunct, so of course I'll still be doing my regular work, but around the country are engaging in disability justice. And so look for me. I'm talking to some other universities to start teaching what I just talked about here to the up and coming scholars who are going to go out and be policy people. And hopefully they will engage in those 10 principles, right? And equity in their policy work. And so I'm excited to be at McCourt School of Public Policy right here in Georgetown, in DC. It's one of the top public schools in the country. And so that's my announcement.
Ooh, congratulations. That is amazing.
And you heard it first here. Yay.
Yes, you heard it first here on The Conscious Conversation. Another way to be able to expand your knowledge and support this disability justice organizer, scholar extraordinaire. Dara, thank you so much again for not just the time here, but just your ongoing work and the ways you bring joy and continue to not only envision but realize that collective liberation and justice for all of our people.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you for having me. Thank you for all your work and everything you're doing. I love it. Can't stop, won't stop.
Hey, much love. We're in this together, solidarity, and look forward to more ways that we'll be able to be in community and get towards liberation. Take care. And take care, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, ASL interpreter. Woo-hoo.